IVM.
What makes you tick, click and stick? If you know the answer to that, you have cracked a very, very important code. The superstar code. And today I have a guest. You can consider him a maverick. From working in advertising to building entertainment brands. And to even being a certified chi running coach, and we'll get to what this chi running is. He has a mad obsession about things. At one point of time it was tea, today it's coffee, and tomorrow it could be any one of you. This man follows his passion to the T and helps everyone become a superstar. Welcome to my show, Abhijit. A great pleasure having you here.
Thank you so much, Vishal.
Well, it's been, we met first in 2011.
Oh, yeah.
And I still remember you were my first chi running coach. So What is chi running? Can you tell everybody that? Because when I said I have learned chi running, people first thought I was giving them some kind of a gali that, what kind of chi running? I said, no, this is chi running. So what is chi running?
Okay. So to answer that, you mentioned this whole thing about getting into something with passion. So I discovered running. More importantly, I discovered that I could run after probably turning my health around. We can talk about that a little later. But what I discovered was there was a better way to run. And normally when I get into any subject, I find the normal way people do it and then the things that are not so obvious.
You try to hack. You find the hacks.
Absolutely. So I found that a lot of errors happen in running, which can cause a lot of injuries. And one of them is in posture. So chi running, actually, I was fascinated with a couple of schools of running, and one of them was chi running. It comes from the Chinese Tai Chi. Okay, so it's really about energy flow. So you can kind of use all your muscle strength and really make it happen and struggle and use your determination, or you can actually use the forces of nature to help you while running. So the whole idea of chi running is to align your body and the movement in such a way that you're going with the flow as opposed to against it.
And absolutely, that gives you additional power without using the additional energy. And of course, I did a couple of training lessons with you, and I have to tell you that chi running has been the secret of me, even though I'm not super athletic and agile, but it has definitely helped me do that. But before we go to the chi running topic, I think that was the time you were going through a major transition in your life. I think just before that, you were like a balloon. That's how you described yourself.
I think my wife does, definitely.
But now you are this super fit stud with this amazing looking hair. How did that transition happen?
Okay, so I guess like many people, one freaked out in life. One part bottle, one part cigarette, etc., etc.
You had everything: cigarette, alcohol.
That's it. Okay. It started and ended there. But ultimately, I realized that it started having its effect on health, and I was ignoring it initially. But then, as they call it, blood tests tell you the picture and things like that. So this was actually 13 odd years ago that I was told that, look, you have to stop. I need to do something about it. So
and what you were like, 30s, in your early 30s?
30 exactly. So I was told that all my levels were too high, which include liver, etc., and I also had a condition called gout.
Oh God, that could be very painful.
Yeah, it was. So I actually cut down alcohol and all of that, and I kept it going for a few years, but gout kept persisting, and I was surprised, hey, I've cut on my alcohol.
And that's because of high uric acid, right? Gout is.
So it's actually a metabolic issue. There's something in your system which is not kind of agreeing with whatever you're putting in. So as it went along, I found that I was still not approaching the body systemically. And so this was about 10 years ago, and this is just when I set up my own company, Superstar, which you talked about. And I realized that gout kept coming back, and I kind of changed my approach to it, hacking as you called it earlier. And I realized that you also need to support it from a subconscious brain's perspective. So while you might do a lot of things in terms of activity, if your subconscious brain is not supporting it and giving you the command that it needs, like the machine code language that you actually need for it to happen, it's not going to happen. It'll keep coming back. So that's when I hacked that bit, and I lost a lot of weight again. And more importantly, I think my big realization was that I could do physical things which I could never do before. So for example, I could not even run for 30 seconds on a treadmill. So when I lost that weight, when I felt far more lighter and more free, I realized I could trek.
So what was the change? Because there are a million people who suffered the same problem. But what was this thing? What was the code you were able to find which helped you do that?
Okay, so the subconscious brain bit, which I told you about, there was a book by Paul McKenna, who's, by the way, one of the top hypnotherapists in the world. And he had a very, I used to think the title was very cheesy. It was called I Can Make You Thin. All right. But because as a coach, that's what I do today, coaching, life coaching, executive coaching, I studied NLP, which is really the whole science of how do you kind of connect with the subconscious programming. Yes.
Yeah.
So there I realized that he was quite a credible figure. And I said, oh my God, those books do seem to have some promise. So actually I bought that book. In one day, I just turned my life around by following a lot of things. For example, earlier...
But you never went to a doctor or all these people. I mean, you just had this problem and you bought this book and that's
it. Absolutely. Also, most doctors look at it from one perspective. So, in fact, when the warning bells were ringing and stuff like that, I'd gone to a naturopath and things like that, who was actually, for the first time, teaching me to look at everything holistically, as opposed to the symptoms which you might get scared of.
But normally this would not be the normal reaction, right? I mean, people who fall sick go to a doctor says eat this pill, eat that pill.
Absolutely.
So you had already gone through that before?
Very little, and maybe intuitively I never kind of felt that that's the right approach. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, when my cholesterol, my triglycerides were way above.
And you were 30 years old with all these problems.
Absolutely. And in fact, even younger than that. So initially I was prescribed statins and things like that, but I think when I bought them and I had it for a week and I felt extremely uncomfortable and I said, no, I'm not going to do this. And so probably that was my wake-up call, personally. But I went to a naturopath and I found this whole approach of doing it holistically. And that's where I started kind of looking at the bigger picture rather than just trying to solve it, at a smaller compartment level. So when I did that whole NLP thing, when I read that book, Paul McKenna's book, I Can Make You Thin, it basically got me to see everything that I was doing. So, for example, I was unconscious eating. I was doing a lot of that. So maybe like a lot of people might do it while watching TV and you eat, but you don't actually realize how much you're eating. I used to do that while reading. In fact, one of the reasons why I used to eat was to read. Absolutely.
Wow.
So the one hack that I kind of implemented immediately was no more books on the table. And that was a massive change. And so that was one. The second thing was there was a recording that came along with the book, which is a 25-minute recording, which I listened to every single night before sleeping. It basically relaxes you. And more importantly, it kind of keeps programming you, saying, hang on, whatever you're wanting to do, your subconscious is also supporting you. Mm-hmm. And that I listened to for like 6 months. So net result of that was, at that time, I lost some 15 kilos in three months, 18 in 4. But it happened in the most natural and the healthy way.
You didn't go on any crash diet?
No, not at all. In fact, the best part of the Paul McKenna approach, which my wife loves, is that eat whatever you want. It's just that you're doing it consciously. And because you're doing it consciously, you eat much less. So that's the net result.
So that's mind hacking, huh? That's absolutely mind hacking.
Absolutely.
But what I'm more interested in is how did you lead to that point? Because at the age of 29, this is not how a normal person needs to be. Of course, in today's world, we hear of people at 29 getting heart attacks. So that's a different extreme.
Sure.
But, you started off your career pretty early. And I think you've now worked with all kinds of companies. So tell me a little bit about your career itself. How did you start?
You mentioned a word right in the onset, which is passion. So honestly, my life has just been driven by passion. So I was very passionate about advertising. So as a consumer, let's call it that, I used to get fascinated about what are these guys all about and stuff like that. So I started life in an advertising agency.
And this was, how old were you?
So 21.
21, okay.
Yeah. So I was in contract advertising and I worked on brands. I was very lucky to be on brands which became turnaround brands. There was something called Philips Audio at that time, which was, very case study winning and stuff like that. So I was very lucky to be a part of that. And I got fascinated with entertainment because I found that entertainment brands are live. So beyond like your static kind of, products, they're people, and you can actually kind of create impressions and connections and relationships.
And that brought you to the famous Amitabh Bachchan's Corporation Limited,
That's
ABCL.
Right. Yeah.
That was your earliest stint, huh?
That was my second stint after the advertising bit, yeah. So entertainment, brands, marketing, probably done in a way that's not done, I think has always been the thread in my life.
But what caused this entire... Was it stress?
Absolutely.
From 21 to 29 in 9 years, you end up with all these health issues.
Absolutely.
What went wrong?
So you nailed it. It's stress. So, I used to think that I used to have something called Irritable Bowel syndrome. I had for 15 years, right from the beginning of my career.
IBS,
Yes. So I never cracked it. And in fact, I got a medical checkup done. And I remember the doctor saying that, okay, we've done all this colonoscopy and this scopy and all of that. I think he just needs some sat isabgol, And I was like, okay, after all this, if that's the solution, it doesn't sound very exciting. But the fact was that ultimately all of that was getting caused by stress. See, and some people take stress physically inside differently from others. So it's how you as an individual take stress versus, let's say, others, So as a system, I realized much later down the line, and that's why my gout happened. It was actually more stress than something that I was eating or doing and things like that. So it's also how you manage that for yourself, which is very critical. And it comes from that initial awareness.
But in your case, it was just a switch, right? So basically, all this happened and you just suddenly decided that I'm reading this book and from tomorrow I'm going to change myself.
The switch was there, but it happened in stages. So for example, earlier I used to think it was food which caused it. So I did a lot of work on that front. But then I started realizing that it's more than food. So for example, the Paul McKenna journey got me into the subconscious bit. Then I realized that maybe that's also not enough. So I suffered a personal setback about a couple of years back, 5 years back, when I lost my mother. So in spite of, doing all of this, it kind of devastated me. And I think I felt extremely derailed in life at that time. So I realized that, hang on, maybe I still haven't figured out how to kind of cope with stress. So I've realized that it's a journey which keeps going on and you keep learning.
One of the things I'm still kind of, a little confused about, that there are people who work, right? But this is really extreme in terms of getting all of this. So was that something also happening in your personal life, or this was just because of all your corporate life? What caused all this?
You're talking about the source of stress?
Yeah.
No, so it's like this. Let's put it this way. If the same stress and there are two people, another person might just take it at 5, 7, which is okay, and I might take it at 10. So it's just that my system takes stress very differently.
Okay.
So it's really about me as an individual. It's not about...
It's not like these companies made you work 24 hours a day and didn't feed you and only made you have cigarettes and alcohol.
Because, like I said, everything I did was with passion. So in fact, it was on the other side, which was like extreme enjoyment. But there was a cost, right, which I didn't kind of factor in at that time. And one ended up paying a price.
So I remember, you talking about this code, which you then called the Superstar Code.
Yeah.
And you, in fact, even named your company. So what is this code and how can you decode this in other people and in yourself? How does a normal person figure out what is their own Superstar Code then?
Okay, so after my great corporate stint in life, which was about 16 odd years, almost 10 years ago, I started Superstar. And the name Superstar comes from my very passionate belief that there's a superstar in every one of us. But I said, while that's nice and inspirational, I also realized that, like I said earlier, the stimuli might be the same for people, but how those people kind of respond to it can change dramatically. So the Superstar Code is about each person's individual superstar code, as opposed to there is one success formula which can work for all. A lot of people used to come to me and saying that, look, I've tried this, The other person also tried this, but somehow it's not working for me. And this is to bother me.
I think that's part of the problem. Everybody thinks that because this guy did this, if keto diet has worked for him, everybody wants to do keto. And if this has happened to them, everybody wants to do this without figuring out that there is a variable in you.
Correct. So it's that combination of you and the external, which I find is very crucial. And the Superstar Code is all about that. So I asked 3 questions in the Superstar Code. It says, what makes you tick firstly? You know, for some people, you might love stress and it actually is good for your health. Whereas maybe for me, it's not. So I need to keep that in mind. Second, what makes you click? Click is about you and the external. You know, what part of you do you use to kind of make the goal work or the external environment work for you? And the third thing, which is a huge challenge for me, is stick. A lot of people go ahead and, you know, have that initial enthusiasm and it's a great battle. But then to keep it going, sustaining that is a massive challenge for a lot of people. Definitely for me. So what makes you tick, click and stick is really about discovering and implementing your Superstar Code.
And how can people be, because a lot of people give up very fast, right? So the sticking part is really about giving up.
Oh, absolutely.
And the clicking part is about implementation.
Yeah.
And the first part is about visualization and theory.
Absolutely.
Which part do people really give up?
So here's my learning on this one. Firstly, I think most people get their goals wrong.
Goal setting itself is
absolutely. So I'll give you a simple example that I used to do in my which I used to cover in my workshop, which is that let's say there are 3 people and they have the same goal. We all 3 want to lose 10 kilos of weight. But if I ask person 1 and through some little bit of deep exploration, you find out that the first person actually wants to do that because he wants to attract the opposite sex in his life. Second person wants to do it because he wants to do better in his career, in his work. Third person wants to do it because of health reasons. So if you actually look at it, 10 kilos of weight loss was never the goal. It was those 3 things. And the problem that happens mostly is that people are chasing A, the wrong goal, and B, even if they do meet the goals, it doesn't matter. So it's like an empty goal, you know. And when you don't meet those goals, it's even worse because you think, oh my God, you know, I'm not good enough and things like that. So that clarity of why is, I think, the most important step before you get into the what and the how. And I have been focusing a lot on this in my journey.
And in your old self, what did you feel worked for you?
In terms of my why? So if I find that anything I do allows me to make new connections and kind of allows the passion to flow, I can do anything. It doesn't matter what subject it is.
But what do you define passion as then?
No, so before the passion, it's the connections. So for example, I might be working on a category I have never been exposed to before. So it could be working on a company, the business is forklifts, for example. Yeah. I don't have a natural affinity for that subject. But what I will start doing is I'll suddenly find these patterns and find excitement. Oh, wow. There are ways that people are doing this and there are lots of ways they haven't even figured out. And that certainly excites me. So finding that non-obvious thing which I mentioned during the chi running example is what excites me. That's what creates a passion for me.
But, you know, so you grew up in Mumbai, right?
Actually, I've grown up all over. I've grown up in Bahrain. I did my schooling there. I've grown up partly in Mumbai, Pune, Delhi, all over.
So what got you this kida of finding this code? So what I'm really trying to understand is that, you know, our education system doesn't encourage this.
Not at all.
You know, our corporate system doesn't encourage this.
No.
So where did this kida in you to find the clicking, ticking and all these things come about? How did that happen?
So a personal journey and things started kind of connecting for me. It's obviously kind of, you know, post facto, but also seeing people struggle. You know, so it's kind of...
So my point is that did something happen in your childhood? Were you like good in sports? What kind of... Because, you know, these things have to develop much early in life. It's not like suddenly at 21, you know, you are discovering and reading all these books. Who influenced you like this?
So my life journey began probably with a lot of self-reflection maybe. So when I was 7, my younger brother was born. He was born mentally challenged. So my parents' focus and attention would kind of, you know, go there. And I think from there onwards, I started kind of, you know, tending and fending, you know, for myself. So I think from there that connecting the dots started happening. So if there was something that happened, that's probably at that time.
At age 7? At
age 7, yes.
And that was in India or you were in Bahrain?
That was actually in Bahrain, yeah.
Bahrain.
Yeah. And so I think from then onwards that thing of I've got to do it myself. I got to figure it out myself. Was probably something.
And you didn't want to kind of, trouble your parents.
Absolutely. I couldn't be a burden, right? Because they're already going through something. And I think at that time I made a subconscious decision that I got to do it all this on my own. Which also created, by the way, this is a good question, probably the stress. Because it's like, then who can I share that with ever? So you've got to kind of figure it out yourself.
So you had to become almost self-dependent much earlier.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really
absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, because I was wondering that, suddenly...
Where's it coming from?
Where is this coming from?
Yeah.
So your self-dependence happened really early.
Very early.
Your passion came in, but, corporate life kind of messed that whole thing up. But then you found the code, which is the superstar code.
The corporate life didn't mess anything for me, to be very honest, because I went through my passion journeys, and in fact, every...
When I say mess, means the health part is what I meant.
Sure. But even when I left the corporate world and when I started Superstar, after a couple of months, I had the worst gout attack ever 10 years ago.
Ooh.
So then I realized that it's not about the environment. It's not about, those things. It's about me and what I am doing with myself.
So what were your uric acid levels at that time?
So I've a baseline is you're not supposed to go above 6.5 if that's kind of benchmark. I was at 9.7 and that's really, really high. And I was told that the only way to get this down was through medication throughout my life, which by the way I never used, and I still until date don't, and I haven't had a gout attack, touch wood, for the last 8 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So everything, if triglycerides, the max is supposed to be 150, I was 367 or something like that. Mm-hmm. Sorry, 367 was one time, and then it even went up to 683. So some crazy levels.
So then what you could have gone back to your corporate life after, getting back healthier. So what kind of made you leave all this and then start a company?
So I think the freedom, the flexibility of going with your own flow and adding value the way you want to. So I think I'm a natural. I like to move from one to the next. I don't like to necessarily stay in one thing for 10 years and things like that, which is what I think is natural with my kind of business model.
So because, one thing I must tell you, and I know you for quite a few years, in your case, it's almost like, you get passionate about something and then you leave it completely. Like there was a time you were only doing running, and then suddenly I don't see you do running, and then it was tea, and now it is coffee.
Yep.
So I don't no longer see any of your running stuff, for example.
Fair. So
are you passionate about running, coffee or tea, or is your passion somewhere else?
So my passion is always about discovering something, discovering that I can do it, discovering new facets to that subject which probably others around me are not kind of experiencing. And when I reach a point where the why, the question that I ask, is this exciting me anymore? And if the answer comes back as no, then I kind of start moving to the next.
Or is it because you just obsess about it so much that it, after a point of time, you've done everything, right? I mean, you've discovered everything you had to discover about coffee or tea or running, and there's nothing else to do.
So let me tell you, actually they're all connected for me. So it's not like I've left running. So for example, running actually got me into keto. Mm-hmm. Because of running, there was this constant challenge that I used to have for nutrition. Running for marathons and things like that, or how do you keep the energy flowing? So this is actually 5-6 years ago where I was like, hang on, I can do a half marathon, I can do a full marathon, what happens after? And I used to literally crash energy wise when I used to try and...
You hit the wall also in the Chicago or which marathon? Remember you told me about that in one of the marathons in the Comrades or somewhere.
Yeah, that was the Comrades, yeah.
Comrades, yeah.
So because that was 89k versus the standard 42k of a full marathon, I just wasn't managing the energy bit. And also what happened at that time was I started realizing that maybe I was over dependent on sugar. Because, as a runner, you have those energy gels and things like that. And that was not natural for me as a source. But when you're running and when you need that kind of crazy energy, so it didn't work for me. So what happened with Comrades was it pushed me to figure out what could be an energy source. And post Comrades, I got into something called paleo. So I actually realized two things. One is the cause of my inflammation and the gout was grains in my life, in my system. So I actually cut down step by step, but it happened after that. And I cut down paleo, which I did 6 years ago. And again, now you might say I was passionate about paleo, but the point is that paleo is now metamorphosized into keto. Ketosis, which, ketogenic, everybody's talking about.
But paleo and keto has a lot of difference, right? I mean,
absolutely. So the
keto is just no carbs. I mean, in paleo, you have a lot of carbs.
No. In fact, paleo is more protein.
No, but paleo has fruits. I mean, you can have fruits in the paleo diet.
So there are lots of interpretations and all that. But the bigger point was, it had a lot of protein content, which I now realize was causing stress in my body.
And uric acid. Protein is a big cause of
absolutely.
Uric acid.
So it was causing stress in my system. So then I realized, hang on, while I have cut out one, let's say, irritant, which is the grain part, I've actually added on something else which was causing stress. So about 2 years ago, I cut down the protein, made it much less, and now it's fat, lots of vegetables, and a little bit of protein. And that's working for me very beautifully. So
you are now completely keto.
No, I'm not keto. So, in fact, there's a cyclical keto, let's call it that, because
keto.
See, like you said earlier, these absolutisms and this is what will work in life is dangerous, to be very honest. You need to take that essence and then see what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And you've got to be honest about that.
So is it also because things don't stick to you then? Is that, when you talk about clicking and sticking, so is it also, can it translate that somehow
absolutely
you do things and...
So my biggest challenge is stick. So I have to keep figuring out a way to get excited about something. And that's what I do. So for example, today I'm very excited about fitness. In spite of, by the way, having a running injury, and that's the reason why I actually stopped the marathons. But today I'm very excited.
If you wanted, you could have hacked it and figured out how to cure that injury. Yeah.
Now I can. Now I figured it out. Because I realized that the way I was training was wrong. It was causing stress in the body. I now know...
So you now say chi is bad, chi running.
Chi is fantastic as a base. But I need to now support...
nutrition and...
No. I need to work with my heart rate, which I was never doing before. Ooh. So what I was doing was just with enthusiasm, just keep clocking those miles. But now I realize that when I do it in sync with my heart rate, in fact, specifically heart rate variability, which is basically the recovery that your heart can do after a workout, it works miracles.
And the VO-max 2 and all that.
Not VO-max. It's just heart rate recovery. Just heart rate recovery. So now if I were to do running all over again, I would do it very differently. And that's the way, that would be running 2.0 for me. So 2.0 is very important for me.
So you need to keep upgrading.
I have to keep doing that.
Keep doing the same
Absolutely.
thing.
Absolutely.
Now I get it. Yeah. So how have you kept upgrading yourself then?
In all ways. So, I mean, for me, the constant sources would be books. I'm a voracious reader, but it's not like I'm reading cover to cover. I read something and I try it out, implement it. Books, podcasts like this, by the way, I've been consuming them for a long time. Video, TED Talks, etc., etc. So a lot of things are always stimulating me. Books, TV, a lot of things. Okay.
I don't know, I may have told this to you before, but you are a massive influencer to me. And somehow I feel that, whatever you and I do are quite common. I love coffee. I love running. I'm also into teas. In fact, if you remember, I told you about the monk's tea.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we are somehow strangely connected. I don't know what you feel about this.
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, I wasn't that much into tea, but when you said white monk tea, it got me thinking, hang on, there's more to tea. I heard the words bulletproof coffee from you. Many, eons ago.
Yeah, eons ago.
You must have bulletproof coffee. And I was like, I don't even drink coffee. Forget about bulletproof coffee. So I am a sponge. And I get that. You are a person of passion. I see that. So whenever a person of passion talks about something, my antenna is always up.
Yeah, and we keep absorbing from each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you are now completely into bulletproof coffee and all kinds
It's my daily ritual. There will not be a day that I won't start my morning without the bulletproof coffee.
And what is your preparation? How do you make your bulletproof coffee?
Okay, so...
which beans?
So normally I go for organic coffee purely because non-organic means some toxins could come into the beans and you're kind of mixing it with fat. So toxins and fat don't go well together. So that's the only reason for organic. So any organic bean. But
so blue toka is a good choice.
It's a good source. But any organic, India now, the level of quality is pretty good. Koinonia is there. There's a couple of, in fact, roasters in India who are doing pretty well. Good stuff. So I grind them fresh. So that's an important thing for me. So it's never stale. So I do that. I add ghee, organic ghee. Okay. And
you never did butter.
I tried butter. So, in my health journey, I'm also lactose intolerant. So, while I tried this Kerrygold Irish butter, which is supposed to be grass-fed and all that, I think ultimately I realized that it still wasn't sitting well with my system.
So, you know which butter I use? I use the Parsi Dairy.
You mentioned this long back. I'd asked you which butter because I was on the butter quest. I remember asking you. But I don't think, honestly, except for ghee, any milk product actually works for me. Mm-hmm. So, and the third thing I used to use coconut oil. But now I am using MCT oil.
Yeah, I get my MCT from the US. There's this deodorized, there's no smell of coconut, nothing.
Okay.
So which one are you using?
There's a company based in Jaipur called Sharrott's.
Oh.
Yeah, so...
I must try that. I didn't know
it's pretty good. I've been having it for almost a year now, more than a year. So it's coconut sourced, so not like palm, which is not exactly a great source. And they're doing it pretty well. So.
And you have it at what time in the morning?
It's about like 6:37.
And then what time do you have lunch? Directly lunch after that?
2 o'clock.
Oh, that's a long...
So there's a concept which is a cyclical ketosis, which is actually driven more by the intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
And So intermittent fasting comes from giving your body a break to actually repair itself and kind of, reset. So I do that quite religiously.
So you follow 16 hours or...
It comes to around 18.
18. So you then 2 o'clock and then you directly have your dinner at what time then?
So I finish off everything by 7 o'clock.
By 7?
Yeah.
And then your next meal is...
Next meal is straight to... The bulletproof essentially is that ability to sustain,
Exactly. So that's what I do. But off late, since I've been traveling, I had to go in and out of this. But that's exactly the routine I follow.
So what I do, let's say I'm traveling and it's a day trip. I will get up half an hour earlier and I will make that bulletproof. And in fact, it really takes... it just makes my trip fantastic because I've had the bulletproof in the morning. The moment the client says, okay, you have to stay back, that means, oh God, I have to carry my blender, everything. I take it and I make it in the hotel in the morning the next day.
But, sometimes I do find bulletproof could be a little more acidic. I don't know if you ever found it acidic.
I think, like I said, when I was using butter, it was more tasty, but I don't think it was as good for me as the ghee is.
Okay.
So with ghee, I'm feeling absolutely fine and light and things. See, my body is very fast in responding. So, for example, a year back, because, part of this, I said, oh, grass-fed butter is there. Why can't I have grass-fed cheese? And I started having cheese every day, and I love cheese. That's my Achilles heel. That's my kryptonite or whatever. I got massive inflammation, and I started putting on weight again. So which I stopped, in fact, almost a year ago. And as I have stopped, the effects have slowly, gone off. So I realized that lactose thingy does have an effect on me, and I can't take it for granted. No matter what it says about organic, grass-fed, that doesn't matter. So those absolutes don't matter.
So, in your whole life now, you have done so many things and somehow you are able to reach a stage of mastery. In your case, I can tell you that because, when it's coming to running, you go for the comrades. When it comes to, ketogenic, you are bulletproof and everything. But at the same level, there are people who can't even go to the gym every day, which they pay 20,000 rupees as membership.
Yep.
Or there are people who just can't even get out of bed.
Yeah.
So what are these people doing wrong?
So to begin with, like I said, that setting of the goal. Why am I doing it? If I'm doing it for the wrong reason, you will end up not doing it. That's number one. Second is, a lot of people think that it's attitude which gets you all the way. Actually, it's behavior. So you may have that intent, let's say, but actually behavior, and if you set the path for it to happen like a no-brainer, you can actually make things happen. And when that behavior keeps repeating, they become a habit. So I've realized that a lot of people can actually solve a lot of issues like this in life just by hacking it. I don't know if, for example, have you heard of, there's a behavioral scientist called BJ Fogg.
Yeah. I've met him.
Really?
Yeah.
Stanford, right?
Yeah.
So I have been using his tiny habits example ruthlessly. And in fact, all my workshops and whoever has used it, they have had some amazing successes, So should I talk about tiny? So yes. Tiny habits really is about, you might say, I want to start meditation. But that 20 minutes every day, calming your mind might seem very daunting. So what BJ Fogg says is, hang on. Firstly, break it down to a micro goal, okay, which is a tiny habit. I will meditate for 1 minute. Okay, that's number one. So it's like 1 minute, yeah, fine. Anyone can do 1 minute, that kind of a thing. But what he also says, and this is what really worked for me, was anchor it to an existing strong habit already happening in your life. Okay, so for example, let's say I used to have my tea at X time in the morning, and I had to write my book. Now I just wasn't getting down to writing my book. Okay, what I did was, when I'm having my tea, that's going to happen regardless. Why can't I write one para while I drink my tea? And this is amazing because at that time, in 2 weeks, I finished off the entire first manuscript. And in fact, there was a withdrawal symptom because after I sent it off, I was like, now what do I do with the tea? I need something to write. So I started writing a blog, So, but the point I'm making is that it just wasn't possible for me. So people need to kind of figure out a no-brainer approach sometime to solve what they think is, I need to change my mindset and my attitude. But you can actually kind of, make things happen this way.
And, when it comes to tiny habit, they also talk about 21 days and all of that, kind of repeating it. So What are the kind of habits you adopted like this using that method?
So, like I said, one was, writing. Writing was not a habit. Meditation was not a habit. And today I've been meditating for at least 5-6 years. And it really helps because, remember I told you about the stress part. So, it's something that I need to do. So, along with my bulletproof, even when I'm traveling, like I'm going on an early morning flight, I will take off that time and meditate. I will do those 20 minutes every single day.
And you know what is my hack for meditation? Yeah. It's this device called the Muse. So you put it on your head. It's like a headband.
Right.
It connects to your phone. And when you meditate, it actually measures your brain activity.
Yeah.
And there are 3 states. There is neutral, calm, and active. And your goal, it's just like a game. Your goal is to keep it above a particular level of calm. And I've been now doing it for several months. And the trigger for me is this gamification of kind of tracking it. And it has really worked for me. So are you using some kind of app to track it, or you're just doing it on your own?
So I used a similar thing. There's something called Heart Math. So they had something which kind of plugs into your ear. And it basically takes the heart response to stress. And this is something that Dave Asprey talks quite a bit about. It's called Inner Math, I think. Inner something. Okay, I'll remember the name. But essentially, it's just a clip-on. And it teaches you that when you breathe, basically it becomes green versus blue or red or whatever.
I've seen that,
Yeah, so it's a gamified thing. So even that works for me. I need to make it exciting. I need to make it kind of, definitely work.
The Vishal Gondal Show will be right back after this break.
Did I just catch you on your way to work? Or did you end up pulling an all-nighter? Let me guess. You have a packed schedule for the day, the week, and probably the month and the year. That's a lot for your mind to handle, don't you think? This buzzing chaos also brings tons of negative thoughts. Am I right? Try spinning that bottle in a positive direction with me, Chetna, on the Positively Unlimited podcast, every Monday on IBM Podcasts. It's time to change your life one alphabet at a time.
So when you were doing this book, you interviewed a lot of other people also. I remember you interviewed me and you were talking about. So what was the big challenge you saw between all the other performers who are already, whether they are in corporate life or any other life, in being a normal person to a superstar? So what are the big things which people are missing? Because most of these people have their goals in place and all of that, right? So what were the things which were missing in the code?
So I studied a lot of performers, successful people, and I tried to figure out, is there like some common pattern and things like that.
And Tim Ferriss's book is almost that, right? Tools of Titan,
in a way. So, but what I did realize, and that was my hypothesis, is that everybody has their own formula. And that came out glaringly apparent for me. And in fact, it also got me into the dangers people fall in, which is blindly emulating your idol or your hero. So what I've realized is that you need to find your own code. So the biggest what I'm called the setback that you ask for people that happens is that if you don't know your own code, a lot of these really successful people, they're very aware of what they're all about. They're aware of their strengths and they're aware of their pitfalls. So if you were to ask me what is it that they get right, it's that. But when you're not, that's very easy to
You can't fake it. And I think the problem is everybody wants to be Steve Jobs or everybody wants to be Elon Musk.
And there's also this pressure. Yeah. See, there's a massive pressure to be like that, perform like that. So you think that if I don't do that, I'm a failure or it's not going to work. Yeah. So it's an unfortunate thing, but as they say, the rat race gets rattier. This pressure is just going to keep increasing and increasing.
But you were able to now take this idea of a superstar code and then convert it into a very successful program. So you do life coaching for individuals and you do coaching for companies to help them with strategy.
Yeah.
So what kind of experiences have you had in both these cases?
Okay, so this was a massive journey. It was a 2-year-long journey. So while I was writing the book, I realized that I can't leave the book as a generalization, because it was probably adding to the problem that already existed outside, which is that, fine, all these 100 people have their own individual codes, but what's mine? And the problem I'll tell you what I realized while doing workshops which use that whole learning. People can stare at the same data in their life and not necessarily connect, not get that insight. What I was doing in the workshop, and that's because of my work, my passion, and the intuition that I'm able to bring to the table, was to help them see the same data in a way they have never seen before. And when people started telling me that, I said, oh my God, then how will they use that in the book to actually make the difference? Otherwise, it's just another static thing of, there's a nice framework, I'll ask these questions, but I'm staring at these same pieces of data, which I've always stared at in my life, but somehow I have not realized it. So it's that realization which also gets you to action.
So give an example for me to kind of understand this. What do you mean by looking at the data and then connecting?
Okay. Without obviously naming people because, the private journeys. Let's say there's a person who came into a Superstar Code workshop and I used to get them to give me data before the workshop. Okay. The data was what you think are your strengths, weaknesses. I would get them to do a 360 degree of the people in their life, the work environment, personal, everybody, to give us the same insights. I would actually collate all that and actually understand that person. I would also use something, the psychometric tool at that time, to understand their natural preferences. So I would use all that data to understand this person. Okay. So there was a person, she felt her strengths were writing, her passion was writing, and incidentally, her job was in corporate communications. But she wasn't using that writing, which is a skill and a passion, to actually help her in the job that she was doing. Because she would do it more, let's say, administratively rather than actually using it as a engine. And she never connected those dots before. So just to make those connections is what I felt was the big thing that happened in a live environment where it's your data, your challenges. And that's what happened in the workshops. So the workshops, in fact, while I work with a lot of corporates, initially the first few workshops were with family members. And that's what actually blew my mind, which is the first workshop was a family of, mother, father, 12-year-old. And at the end of it, the mother actually said that I've been married to him for 20 years, but I never realized this about him. And I was like, whoa. And this is a family talking. And because of that, more families came, word of mouth, etc., etc. And I was like,
so you are coaching an entire family?
Absolutely. That happened. And I said, if this is happening in a family where, you technically are so close, but you still don't necessarily look at that person in a way because you look at it from your filter, right? Imagine in a corporate situation. So a lot of conflict happens because you assume something about the other person.
And I remember you telling me that you even managed to do the impossible. Coach your ex-wife, right?
Oops.
How did that happen, right? It's very difficult.
So I've been warned and banned from talking about this. But yes, she did reach out a couple of years back. But she wanted help on her business. And so she said, look, I know you, trust you, and I feel you can add value. And that was the journey which happened.
No, but the question is that how is it different coaching an individual versus coaching a company? Is it the same concept or you find it a lot different in that sense from the execution?
So the complexities will just go higher with a team versus, let's say, an individual, because an individual itself is like a challenge. But then there are team dynamics. So in fact, what I did with the Superstar Code format was, after the Family Insight, I created a team code version. So that meant, people got to know each other as people. And there was another part which I added, which is how they fit in as a team. So at the end of it, they actually got a very customized solution on how that team would work, as opposed to, so that solution would not work for another team, is the point I'm making. So that kept happening for different kinds of companies. And that's how the Superstar Code actually, I rolled it out, not just in India, but in, destinations like Dubai. And that exposed me to a lot of multicultural, people, etc. So it tested it, in various places.
But the problems are the same.
Absolutely.
You go anywhere, the problems are largely
It just
the
gets
same.
maybe more complex. Like in a place like Dubai, you have different ethnicities suddenly working together. And so that adds to the complexity, as opposed to, let's say, maybe in India. But that's it. The problems, you're right. Conflict will happen because of assumptions you make about people, and correcting them can actually kind of, add a lot to the solution. And that's what the Superstar Code used to do.
But when it comes to implementing this, right? So one is theory and kind of working in a workshop. But how many of them have been successfully able to implement something like this in their real companies or real life?
So, like I said earlier, sticking is the biggest challenge, right? So it can happen if, for example, the leadership is very committed and saying they take those metrics that come out of the workshop and they said how these will get translated into key result areas, job responsibilities. So that I found is one of the easy ways.
So that's in a corporate, but as an individual, how do I create a code which sticks?
So one of the ways is to have a coaching journey. And that's where I found that if I was a part of that, let's say after you realize all that, then you see the journey through. That's the reason why I actually became a coach. Because I realized that you can't have these one-off events.
So you need to be accountable to someone,
Absolutely.
basically.
So it's like a sports coach, right? You're through the matches, you're through the journey.
That's what we do at Goki, right? I mean, the whole idea of Goki was you set a goal and then there is a health coach on the other end who you are accountable
Active
to.
partner. I get it.
Yeah.
And I'm totally with you on that. So wherever possible, that's the best way of doing it. Because there'll always be a gestation period of, you want to do it, you try it out, 10 things will not work. But more importantly, getting the learning from what works or didn't work is the coaching journey. Because then you say, okay, hang on, why did this not work? Mm-hmm. So I could have just given up on ketogenic diets, etc. But so hang on, maybe it was that. It was the cheese. It was so something has to help me.
So how has your journey impacted people around you, your family, your wife, etc.? So what has been the change in them because of what you've been doing?
I think I realized that, I got into this to help others. But I think the biggest thing was that when I focused on myself, authentically or whatever, actually it created far more impact outside rather than, just trying to help somebody. Because people would take my example, say, hey, you went through this. This gives me the confidence to do this far more. And I found that was a bigger catalyst of change than actually, trying to do a program or whatever. So for me, I think just being myself, living myself, I think that was probably the biggest learning I had.
No, I'm saying, so how did that impact others? Like, I know your wife started this passion project of being a chef.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how did that happen to her in that sense? Was it her own journey or was that some influence from what you were doing?
So I mean, I think it was always a passion. But like I said, when I do something...
She was also in the corporate world, I presume, right?
True. So when, let's say, she sees me passionately doing something, like I said, it kind of transfers, right? So it's that part of it which I would say, if there is any impact, besides the active counseling which also happened, I'm saying that's the takeout. That, hey, I can do this.
No, because what she came up with is such an amazing concept.
Absolutely.
And, this whole idea of this kitchen which is set up every weekend, right? So tell me a little bit more about that whole idea of what she's doing.
Sarita Pereira, that's her name. So she has a dinner lab called the Love Fools.
Love Fools.
Yeah. So she's
Dinner
also
lab.
all about passion. Yeah. So the Love Fools is about that. So it's the 8-course curated meal.
I have to come for that, man.
You must.
Please book me up. Yeah.
It's like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday thing that happens. Okay. It's an 8-course thing. She decides the menu. So it's not an a la carte. You don't know what you're getting. It keeps getting revealed course by course. That's one. But she gets to know where you're coming from before. So for example, she knows what your loves are, passions are.
And how do you communicate that?
Everybody gets in touch. It's all online before. And they give her the preferences.
And what is the size of a typical group?
So maybe 15, 20 people normally.
So you have to get 20 people yourself, or you just need to be one?
So she has two kinds of engagements. One is something called a community dinner. So on Saturdays normally it's a community table where individuals or people, one or two, come in and become part of a stranger group doing fine dining together, which is by the way been a big hit. I mean, that was surprising for me. I was like, wow, this can happen in India and Bombay. And the other thing is private groups. So people come to celebrate special occasions and all of that. So everything gets curated. Everything gets customized to, for example, dietary regime. So people will tell her that I am vegan, I am that. So
I am
all that
Jain,
gets,
but I can have this.
Absolutely. It gets factored in. So it becomes very personalized, very customized, and also, like I said, it's an experience because you don't know what you're getting, and people love to bring their loved ones and share that, in this kind of thing. So it's like, I'm amazed with
And
the
this
way.
is at home, or where do
No. So there's a bungalow that she does it out of in Bandra. So it's bang opposite Pale Village Cafe. So it's a quaint little bungalow. And while her name is Sarita Pereira, the bungalow is also called Pereira House. But she doesn't own it. But yeah, so she set up this quaint thing and it's been going on for a year and a half. So she's total passion. So she went and did an internship in a Michelin restaurant 3 years ago in Spain.
Yeah.
So she did that. And yeah, I mean, my little bit of help was to push her.
No, and while you are saying little bit, I do believe that, it has to be a lot, right? Because again, from being a person in the corporate world, so she was in advertising, or where was
She was in advertising.
in
yes.
advertising, to suddenly going to Spain to learn how to be a chef, and then coming and starting something as crazy as this.
Yeah. So my credit, I believe that the other person should talk about it, but I pushed her to get into, like, from her, she used to keep cooking and trying it out. I said, like, take it to the next level, then only will you know. So that was the only input or push.
So how did you deal with all the naysayers, right? Because like all the stuff you have done, I'm sure there must be a million people who said, what kind of stupid superstar code idea is this? Matlab, ye kya hai? Please be serious. You can't come in a company and talk about things like this. Or for that matter, what your wife did, Sarita, like starting this kind of a restaurant where there's no menu, you just come and order things. How did you deal with the naysayers?
So honestly, I think I follow what you just said before this chat, which is just do it. I believe that if it is there inside, just do it. And when there is output and when people recognize that output, then suddenly they're the biggest fans. So those same naysayers I have found, like, oh my God. So for me, my work happens through testimonials and people who have gone through it. And I always believe that that's the best way, as opposed to me trying to sell anything to anybody, because that's not what I want to do. Let the passion talk for itself, let the work speak for itself, that's fine. And my wife also says, hey, you should be doing business development, but I've never done that.
No, my question is that, because there are a lot of smart people in this world, but not everybody is able to leave their jobs and start all these things, right?
Sure.
So, and whenever you talk to them, they're like, oh, I have a mortgage, I have kids whose educations need to be funded, I have this, I have that, they have a million excuses.
Yep.
While in your case, you had none of those. You figured out a way to move ahead.
Sure.
So how could all these other people, and in your corporate life, and you've met all these people, how have they been able to make a shift? Let's say, like, I have this friend of mine, again, I'm not saying, he's a CEO of a very big company, and he's like, you know what, I'm only doing this because I'm going to one day quit all this and become a wildlife photographer.
Right.
And I'm like, dude, why are you waiting to do, why can't you do it now? What is stopping you?
Okay, there are two responses of mindfulness. So one is that, A, I'm going back to that, what is it that you really want to do? B, how do you know you're not doing it already? See, there's this idealistic thing of this or that. But the point is that what is it that you really want to do, and how do you not do it already where you are sitting? So it's like people say purpose, right? But that doesn't mean that you can't be driving purpose. Like, for example, I drove my purpose once I realized it 4 years in the corporate space. So Superstar did not happen overnight. It happened 4 years because I realized what actually drove me, And when I realized that I love new connections, helping people find those connections and their own passion within themselves, my last 4 years in my corporate life was actually driving that. So it kind of was a test run for me. So I think people also need to start walking steps. They could be baby steps for some, they could be master steps for others. But I think that this A or that becomes very scary for people. That binary thing is not something that everyone can do. But if you can start taking steps and you start realizing oh yeah, wow, it is me. This is me, and this is what I really want to do. I think that's important.
So because all these new startups who are coming up, right?
Yeah.
And their biggest problem is that none of them are able to deliver product experience.
Sure.
And, when it comes to product experience, when it comes to consumer, all these people are unable to stick, which is the biggest problem. They are acquiring customers using all kinds of things. So how can whatever you just talked about be applied to a startup? So is this a problem only with big companies, or do you think startups also go through the same challenge?
So, okay, I'm just trying to understand what is the challenge exactly? So when you say...
So the whole challenge of change and moving, right? So when you're talking about decoding the superstar code.
Sure.
So there's an individual level, there's a corporate level, but largely you talk of larger corporates in this case. But when it comes to startups, is there a relevance of this?
So whether it's a startup or an established company, the why, remember I spoke about a why at an individual level? There's also a why at a team level or why at a company level. What is it that your company actually wants to achieve, which is not necessarily only the financial metrics? It's what excites that team.
That's the Simon Sinek, right? The whole talk of Simon,
Yeah. So I have found that when that is not clear and people are not aligned to that, then things can just kind of falter. So it doesn't matter whether it's a startup or it's a established company. So A, to articulate, B, to align, and C, to then have steps which kind of help you see the manifestation of that rather than it becoming like a pipe dream is probably the biggest thing that I have found as an issue of corporates. So if I don't have a passion for that user experience you talked about and why I want to make a difference in that person's life, the customer's life, then it's never going to happen. So it needs to come from there. I need to kind of have it as part of my DNA goal. As opposed to, hey, okay, I'm just going to be a startup and, we'll just keep scaling up, So that's my answer to that, to be honest. And that's what I found across.
And when it comes to all the kind of companies you work for, you said you work with large companies, small companies. What is a typical engagement like? How much time does it take for them to kind of go through this entire journey and possibly start implementing it? Is it like just one day and you're on?
No. Okay. So a lot of my last 2 years, I have been focusing on something called helping organizations figure out their 2.0. So like I was talking about my 2.0, because everyone's now suddenly realized that, hang on, they can't keep doing what they were doing because that may not get them where they need to get, because dynamics have changed, reality has changed around them, etc. Up till this point, it could have worked, but now they all feel the urgency to kind of calibrate, redefine. So when I do something like this, I first understand the real story internally. So I would interview all the key people across, the organization. Then I would go externally and I would meet up with ecosystem stakeholders, customers, people who see it in a very different way, perspectives. I'm always looking for perspectives. Bring it together. Then there's a workshop. And in that workshop, I get the leadership team to essentially re-look at the reality and then re-look at what they want to create basis that reality. So this exercise is something which takes maybe 4 to 6 weeks.
And then implementing something like this?
Yeah, so then what happens in the workshop normally is there are specific outcomes that come out of it. So there are a lot of times where the engagement goes then beyond that, where they say, okay, now we've agreed on these metrics. Can we get your support on maybe via coaching or whatever? And so I've had those kind of engagements as well, where the engagement has gone from 2 to 3 years, in fact. So from the first part. So it all depends on the nature of the engagement and whatever they are open to. Some companies have managed to execute everything because the leadership was so clear with the output that, hey, this is what we believe in and we want to make it happen. So for me, it doesn't matter whether I was involved or not involved, but at the end of it, if they actually implement, it's like a very important high for me.
And during this workshop, are there any books which you talk about or you recommend people to go through? Is there
Hundreds.
So tell me 5 books which everybody should read according to you and why.
So it's all contextual, to be very honest. But you talked about Start With Why of Simon Sinek. I think purpose is a very powerful starting point for anyone, and that why at a large life level, but why even at your specific goal level, I think is an important journey. So I would definitely kind of endorse that book. I found Tools of Titans personally very, very empowering. It got me back into fitness because I just love the way he kind of trifurcated it into healthy, wealthy, and wise. And I used to literally read one thing every day and then kind of figure out how relevant it was to me and to implement it.
So what are the 3 rituals you implemented from that book?
So thanks to Tools of Titans, I changed my fitness regime totally. I got into heart rate variability training and all that because of that. Then meditation in a far bigger way.
Meditation even I have taken after Tools of Titans.
Yeah. So that, and it became active, and it was like a validation.
So it was like every successful person in the world meditates.
Yeah. In fact, he said that was probably one of the biggest common factors.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes. They have some mindfulness practice.
Yeah, some mindfulness practice.
Yeah. Absolutely. That I got, and I mean, those are the big things. So there's I don't know if you've ever subscribed or heard Brian Johnson.
No.
So Brian Johnson is also a curator. What he does is he, in fact, compiles the best books in the world. So from fitness to self-help and all of that. He's got a YouTube channel and things like that. And he beautifully compiles it. So there are these free YouTube videos where he distills it down to 6 actionable points, things like that. And I started listening to him about 3 years back. So that was a huge inspiration, and it remains so. He also does these pressy notes of those books, but that you have to subscribe to. But he is one of the Brian, B-R-I-A-N, Johnson. So on the heels of Tools of Titans, I have been following Tribe of Mentors as well.
Actually, I have not read that book yet. I just didn't.
So it's a little different, and it's also valuable. But of course, for me, probably Tools of Titans are a little bit impactful in life.
Mm-hmm. Do you read anything which is fiction?
My problem is not that I don't have an issue with fiction per se. I have this massive backlog of books, and so when I have to choose, it tends to then become non-fiction. That's the only thing. But I would love to read. There are so many like Nordic noir and all kinds of things that I love to read. And I'm not pigeonholed to any category or anything like that. If, like for example, if I'm watching a TV show and I hear something about anything, I want to explore that and maybe his work and things like that. So that's what happens. For me, it's all about context, linkage, and then deep diving into that. So,
and you said you also read BJ Fogg, right? BJ Fogg has a book, or
no? He doesn't have a book. He has a website.
He has a website. Yeah, Tiny Habits is a website.
Yeah, it's a website, and there's a lot of work on it. And in fact, he has a mini coaching program. Yeah. So he actually kind of coaches you with those tiny habits.
I know a couple of people who actually went to San Francisco or whatever in Silicon Valley.
Did a program.
He charges like a bomb for that, but you can go and do these programs.
But there's a free thing online where people can sign up, and he actually kind of handholds it for 2-3 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, to actually see those tiny habits through. I did that, and that was pretty good.
That's amazing. And what are the podcasts you are on? You said you listen to a lot of podcasts.
Tim Ferriss.
Of course, Tim Ferriss.
I've been listening to him for some time.
So which is your favorite episode there?
Trying to remember. I haven't heard one for a long time. But because I read it, I think I heard the Laird, the surfer. That was some time back.
So I'll tell you what has been my favorite of late has been of this Japanese lady called Con Mary.
The tidy master.
Yeah, who talks about, just minimalism and cleaning and making sure you keep things in order.
The whole decluttering thing.
Right? Decluttering. So I was like super impressed with it.
That was nice.
And I think that's one tip if anybody wants to take off is throw away things you don't use.
Yeah.
If you are just keep the 5 t-shirts or the 4 trousers or the 3 pairs or 2 pairs of shoes and donate everything off. So I think part of Indian culture specifically is that you just keeping things in places everywhere. And in my house also, every drawer you open there are stuff lying around. And I think one thing which I really loved that episode.
And I totally suffer from the opposite of that, which is hoarding, and my wife totally complains, especially the books, by the way. But I think there is a beautiful act of decluttering, right? Where you feel lighter after doing that. And then it simplifies life, right, for you.
So I did the most ultimate declutter. I only wear red t-shirts and red shoes, and that's it. So I said I'm not going to, and I have only 2 trousers or 3 maybe. That's it. And whenever I have to travel, I have to plan. I just have a carry on luggage. I have never checked in a bag for ages because it has decluttered my entire travel and wardrobe. So I think it kind of makes, suddenly you kind of set yourself free, because I do international trips. And when I'm in the airport and they're like, "You're going to US?" I said, "Yeah." "And where's your bag?" I said, "No, I have no bags." And here people with, 4 massive bags and shoving everything in. And I carry no luggage wherever I go. So I think it kind of makes a huge difference. And you get this feeling of liberation that you get out of the plane and you can now just go out.
Yeah. So, along with Tim, I listen to Dave Asprey quite a bit, the Bulletproof Coffee founder.
Dave actually has now created a massive empire on this Bulletproof Coffee thing. I met him a couple of times. Really? I've been to one of the Bulletproof conferences too. When it was very small, but now it has become into this massive consumer product thing. He has cafes and he's creating all kinds of products on Bulletproof. And but there's interesting that there is this whole tribe of people who are debunking it, saying, "Oh, this is all fake" and all of that. Sure. What has been your view on the whole Bulletproof thing which he's doing? Of course, Bulletproof Coffee we know, but all the other products he's coming up with.
So I relate to Bulletproof not for the coffee per se, but I think his whole approach. So I follow the framework. So for example, he's talking about toxicity of food. So, to see if a food is bulletproof or not, that gave me it's a simple PDF which you download from his site, free of charge. I think it gave me a framework to evaluate, and that has really, really helped me. So I like the framework. I like the thinking. I don't necessarily, like I said, this whole absolutes of this is God and that he's God. No, I like to distill, see, okay, this connects, this resonates with me. I would like to follow this. So that's what I do. For example, one of my big things I realized which was causing my stress was sleep. So this I've got from Dave Asprey.
Everybody does.
Yeah. Sleep. So how lighting affects all of those things. So now, in fact, today consciously apps, I use all of that to help me, to support me in the journey of sleep.
So, my biggest hack is I don't even keep the phone in the same room. It's in a different room. The other thing which I realize, and I think if you are listening to this podcast, you should do it right now. Shut all notifications from your phone.
Right.
Keep it in permanent silent mode. No vibration, no dial. Because what I realized is that while we think that people are desperately trying to call us and everything is important, it is not.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you make yourself available to people every second of the day, they are going to disturb you. But if you're not available, you should be controlling the destiny of yourself using these devices. So I think it's massively liberating when I can decide when I want to open my phone and communicate with one versus, notifications pinging and calling and, all of that. So that kind of massively helped me, and that improved my sleep because I'm no longer subconsciously thinking of some notification or some call I'm going to get on my phone.
No, I totally concur with that.
The other thing which I did, I got rid of using a computer years back. I have no laptop, no PC, nothing. I am only on an iPad, and of late I'm even stopping the use of iPad. So my only device is my mobile phone.
Wow.
So it restricts me to send very short messages. So my messages are...
Your engagement is limited to that kind of interaction.
I don't read emails more than 2 lines. So people in my office already know. People who know me would not send me emails. And if you're listening to me, if you're going to send me a long email, sorry. I just don't read more than 2 lines. And if you cannot communicate, actually the subject line is what you need to only focus on. If you can clearly write a perfect subject, you can, communicate the rest.
Absolutely.
And even my communication is largely very micro. Because, you don't want to waste writing.
I remember you saying that you also hate PowerPoint presentations, right?
So, my point is there is something important to communicate talk.
Correct.
Because mail is not the best means to communicate long formats. It's a good way to cover your ass. And corporates do it just for that.
Sure.
But when you want to have a meaningful discussion, pick up the phone and talk to the person.
Oh, absolutely. I think things are unfortunately also getting a little impersonal. And therefore that sterilized thing, and there is no that, the human touch like you talked about, and that can...
So you talked about Dave Asprey's podcast, Tim Ferriss, who else?
So Dave Asprey, then there is... So if on the health and fitness space, I follow someone called Mike Mutzel, but I think Dave Asprey is pretty much kind of all-encompassing for me, so a lot of light science and therapy.
No, my only problem with Dave Asprey is he's just pushing his products too much in everything now.
So I discount that. So for me, I know that, okay, hang on, 90% of this is going to be also sell, but there is some stuff that's coming out of it, and which is what I focus on.
Yeah. Because what I am trying to now do is every time I go, I am trying to meet, there's this massive work happening on life elongation. All these American billionaires who have, 50 billion, 40 billion, they don't want to die.
Yeah.
And they're all spending billions on figuring out. And the hacks they're talking about is, I think in the next 5 to 10 years, they're all going to become mainstream. Currently, all of this is restricted to the multi-millionaires, where they're injecting stem cells and injecting their own blood and all the crazy things happening. But there's one place I want to go, and maybe you should take that as your next passion project, which is the Blue Zones. Have you heard of the Blue Zones?
Yeah, so like Okinawa and all these places.
Places where people are living above 100 years. And what have they done right is really what should be the real superstar code, right? Because ultimately it's about what is causing these people to live over 100 years versus, everybody else who are, popping up in India especially. It's really bad in terms of, life, the whole life expectancy and all of that. So podcasts, what kind of movies do you watch? Are you a movie buff at all?
I mean, okay, so I watch more TV show than movie. Movies occasionally, but I think in the last 15 odd years I found a lot of better writing. I'm talking about the international TV at least.
Of course, Narcos you must have seen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing that was.
So I got into TV because I just found fantastic content, engagement and things like that. And that's probably where my most fiction happens, if I may call it that. So I can watch anything to anything. I mean, from like last year, I got totally into the Scandinavian TV, I don't know if you've heard of The Killing, which is Forbrydelsen, which was a massive hit in the UK. So, but it's a very different take on crime and the culture, etc., etc. And we got so excited about that we took a trip to Copenhagen, wife and I.
After watching that show?
Yeah.
Wow.
The Killing, by the way.
Oh, God. Was that a message to someone?
I don't know. But anyway, so it worked for us. But I like to explore culture. And for me, that is always something that excites me.
And that got you into the coffee culture.
Absolutely.
The Vishal Gondal Show will be right back after this break.
Every week comes a show where 3 people come together to tell you about stuff they like. A movie, a TV show, a book, and other stuff. Tune in every Monday on the IVM podcast app to IVM Likes. Batman approves this message. Thank you, Batman.
So tell me 5 things about coffee which I would not know or anybody would not know.
Okay, so the first thing that people assume about coffee is that if I don't add milk or sugar, it's going to be bitter. What I discovered, and it was my biggest surprise point, was, hang on, if coffee is done right, it's not bitter, surprise, surprise, but more than that, it actually has flavors, natural in the bean, which can be watermelon, fruits, berries, what have you. So, for example, you may have heard people talking about wine tasting and things like that, where they get different kinds of flavors. Wine has a flavor palette. Okay, let's say about 400 possible flavors that your system can pick up. Coffee has double of that.
Wow.
There's nothing in this world, no food, that has that much of flavor possibility that as much as coffee. What creates the flavor? A couple of steps and processes. It's about where it's grown, how it's grown, the quality of that.
The temperature, the water pH, everything, right?
Everything. So when things in the chain fall in place, at the end of it, you get fantastic, amazing flavor. Just like it happens in food, it happens, like I said, in wine. It happens today in like single malt.
The problem with coffee is everybody expects coffee to be bitter and they just add too much sugar to it and that's what adds the taste.
But that's the old, like I said, I like to see, oh my God, that's the paradigm. But hang on, there's something which people are not getting and that excites me. Always. So people think that coffee is something which is supposed to be strong and therefore has to be, like you said, sweetened or, kind of added to. But I have found that coffee, so that's one part, which is the beverage itself. But the bigger high was finding there's this whole craft revolution that's happening across, like not just coffee, but everything. Beer, wine, you name it, right? Whiskey, etc. In everything. Cheese, chocolate, right? But what is craft? It's about passion and purpose, right? So today's generation, while I call it my PPT, which is passion, purpose and technology, So it's not just technology that's happening in the world today. It's passion and purpose. And when these three things get together, that's when magic happens. So in the craft world of coffee, it's about connection between people. And that's what I found fascinating. So for example, the connection is not just about human, hey, hi, how are you? You're my friend now. But once upon a time, coffee farmers, okay, it was about us versus them. If I can buy cheap from you, I am better off. Whereas now, it's about if I can help you grow better, you will make more money from me. And if I can do that, my customer will get an experience which he never did before. So the whole chain benefits. And I find that amazing.
And I think the new revolution of cold brew, I'm just loving cold brew, especially in the hot season.
Oh, it's awesome.
So you know what's my new hack for bulletproof? I actually make cold brew coffee. And then I add butter in it, but it didn't work because butter was not melting. So now what I do is I make cold brew.
Okay.
Then I heat it, and then I make it into a bulletproof coffee.
Okay.
And the taste of that is completely different because it has not touched anything hot. So it's like completely different taste.
How much do you heat it? As in like...
I mean, just to make it warm enough. It's not like, it's not boiling. It's just basically converting the cold to... And the reason I did that is because the butter was otherwise just floating in the cold.
I'm sure no one has heard of this hack. Which is you heat the cold brew. Nice one, Vishal.
No, because otherwise the butter was not melting inside.
Fair enough.
So, or I have to find something else which kind of, sits into the coldness.
Interesting.
I read some blogs, they talked about adding some kind of ice cream. I was like, listen, I'm not going to add ice cream to my bulletproof coffee and, make it bad. So coffee, you were saying, which are the best coffees in India people should try?
So, what was happening in the West, and by the way, it's a recent phenomenon in the West as well. So it's not like, India's 100 years behind or anything like that. What I'm talking about is what is called specialty coffee.
Because Blue Bottle and all these things, became a massive phenomenon in Silicon Valley.
Yeah. So today, in the US, it's actually tipped towards specialty coffee. The entire consumption of coffee has gone towards specialty coffee in the US. Finally, it wasn't like that. It's changed only in the last couple of years. And there are pockets of these excellence, like Australia is like coffee capital, they consume.
Actually, I didn't know about Australia being coffee capital.
It is.
Japan is mad about coffee, I know that.
In pockets. But Australia, like the worst of the worst coffees that you'll get in Australia will be far better than any of the coffees you'll find in the US.
Yeah.
So it's their cafe and roasting culture which has gotten exported, by the way, to the US and the UK. That's transformed the cafes in these places. So you were asking me about India, right? So far, and by the way, India is like the 7th largest coffee producer in the world. Yeah. But it was never for India itself. It was always like tea getting exported. The good stuff was always getting exported outside. Now what has happened in the last 5 years with companies like Blue Tokai, the farmers are realizing that, there could be domestic demand if, we do it this way, etc., etc. So slowly there is a direct relationship between roaster and farmer that started happening. So there are a couple of now new age roasters who have got into the fray. A lot of them, in fact, in Jaipur, in Bangalore, of course, Delhi, and of course now Bombay finally. Bombay was probably the last.
And there's only one Blue Tokai outlet in the middle of nowhere in that Lakshmi Mill compound.
No, you have in Bandra, which actually is there's a couple of months back, in fact. Okay. So in Bandra you have two places, in fact. You have Blue Tokai, you have Koinonia.
Oh.
Yeah, so now it's finally started because it wasn't there in Bombay earlier. Delhi was like 2 years ahead.
London has some amazing coffee shops.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love
But like I said, massive Aussie culture.
Yeah.
So, it's just been transformed and very fast. So, why? Because they are so picky about their coffee. So, where they are, expats, they expect the coffee to be that way. So, what happened was it just created that, that quality to be forced down people's throats and cups. So, Blue Tokai is doing some fantastic work. Koinonia I mentioned. There's a roaster in Delhi I use called Quick Brown Fox. Yeah, young, very cutting edge, and the kind of flavors I've never got before in India. Mm-hmm. So in my espresso I will get chocolate, which is fine, but tropical fruit as a complement to that, which just was not happening, let's say, with regular ones, earlier. So that kind of stuff is something that has started happening in India. So there is some variety, but the nature of the bean, the farming, etc., still we are nowhere obviously close to the Africas of the world.
Even the consumers don't understand it, right? I mean, that's the point.
Till they haven't tasted it. Till they haven't. And by the way, this comes back to the brain thing. And if I can just share this very quickly, there's an old story of when Christopher Columbus landed, on some islands, that the natives were looking at the ships, but they still couldn't see the ships because they didn't know what ships look like. So it didn't exist in their mental framework, right? So what happened with me with espresso was that I was having Indian coffee, espresso, and the beans in that, and then wife and I took a trip to Singapore. And I had an espresso, and suddenly I was tasting blueberries, and I died. I said, how is this even possible? I went to 2-3 more cafes, and I had those kind of flavors. So I said, must be those wow machines that they have and stuff like that. So I took some beans back, home, and I put it in the home machine that we have, and I started getting similar flavors. So I said, oh, it was the beans. So then after that, the beans got over, and then I went back to good old, Indian beans, and I started getting flavors I'd never gotten before. So I realized that my brain had gotten re-educated. It didn't know that those flavors were possible.
Same here. I can now taste the difference between Arabia coffee and Robusta, right? That's
Arabica,
and Robusta. I didn't know before, and now your palate kind of starts developing, right? Previously it is all...
till it doesn't, people will say, what are you talking about? There are no flavors. So there are different people whose flavors would get influenced by different things. So flavor is a very complex chemical thing, in your brain. So if you don't educate people and get them to experience that, they will never appreciate it. So it's a combination of, that which I've realized. Otherwise, people say, what are you talking? Like, you mean pineapple, like you've added the flavor pineapple? So no. Hang on.
Normally people think now wine has really become that. Right? People are trying to get this into wine, but into coffee was... Yeah. And I really hate people when I see them putting like 2 sachets of sugar in their coffee, and I'm like, dude.
No, but I'll tell you what, the thing is, you got to start from where people are. So the other problem of, let's say, specialty and craft is that snobbery that ends up happening, which is, what? You're a coffee drinker and you're having milk and sugar with it, and you kind of are condescending about it, then already it puts off a lot of people. So this is not for us. This is for some hi-fi.
No, but my point is that a lot of these coffee shops are fooling them, right? 3 pumps of vanilla.
Sure.
Then they're doing all these crazy things. Sure. They're just putting sugar. There's nothing great on these flavors. And people think that having this, some mocha, macchiato, whatever is... So they are assuming that coffee flavors are those.
Yeah, absolutely.
While the real coffee flavors are what you just talked about.
Absolutely.
It comes from the bean and not the pumps which are being pumped into that coffee.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
And unless they, meet people like you, I don't think so anybody would even realize that.
Oh, absolutely. So, I've been into specialty coffee for 4 years, and my one big high is to get people to first taste coffee without milk or sugar. And by the way, my wife is successfully converted. She used to have it only with milk and sugar. To have it only like...
So I actually transitioned. So my transition happened with Nespresso.
Okay.
So Nespresso was the closest which came to this, and now of course I can't even drink Nespresso because I have gone into beans, and I also, by the way, have a grinder and everything. I also kind of freshly grind my beans for my bulletproof.
Oh, brilliant!
Almost every alternate day. But clearly,
and you'll feel the difference when you don't, right?
Absolutely. So I think clearly, right? The process is very, very different. But coming back to our discussion, so you have talked about your podcast, your books, your videos.
Yep.
So what are the 5 things which you can't get out of your house with, or when you travel, you always carry with you?
So, like I said, if it's overnight, my bulletproof kit, which includes AeroPress, that's my coffee maker, which is like the easiest to carry outside, NutriBullet. And unfortunately, because of these things, I have to check in my baggage.
Well, you need to figure out a hack for that.
Yeah, I know. So, because it's a mixer, right? And, to take it, and it's always like a...
But there's a very small, coffee grinder you can actually almost
So, I don't have to grind it. What I do is, if it's a one-day trip, I get it pre-ground just for that trip. So, that's okay. But it's the blending which happens with my NutriBullet, which I just don't get with a hand frother, which, once I'm used to that, I just can't handle the other variant. So that's what I always take. I have to have my music. My number one, by the way, passion, and has always been
I know I was
music.
Your Spotify supplier for the longest time.
Yeah, and I still have it. So music, I mean, everything ultimately comes down to music for me. It's a soundtrack of life. So in fact, one of the reasons why I really loved running was it gave me a fantastic excuse to listen to my music.
What are your favorite tracks?
So, okay, there again I explore and I get into whatever. So for example, in the last couple of months I got into jazz, but then I got into something called avant-garde jazz, which means far more experimental jazz.
I didn't even know something like this existed.
Yeah, so I post this on my Instagram every morning with my Bulletproof. So I've actually created something, I don't know if Dave Asprey is listening, but something called Bulletproof Jazz. So in which I have my Bulletproof coffee and I'm playing a new album. Every morning.
Don't call it Bulletproof Jazz because he'll copy it and sell it and not even pay you $1 for it.
But that's what I do. So every day I'm discovering a new album. Every single day. So
how do you discover? Means what do you do? You just search or?
So I have some kind of filter. So I've said, okay, there's a label called ECM. They're fantastic. And maybe that's a filter. There's so it could be a label. It could be like artist, which is where the beauty of services like Spotify, etc. Apple Music come in. Curation, right? So for me, finding something new, that 2.0 every day is very important. In fact, I used to have a saying on my softboard when I used to be in the offices, WBYMT, what blew my mind today? This is a very important thing for me. So, that's like a mantra, always.
So what has been your biggest failure so far?
So, for me, I have to always marry passion with perspective and objectivity. When I don't do that bit, which is the objectivity bit, I can get carried away. So I can get burnt. It'll get, like you said, I can get over deep into something and then that can create disappointment and all that. So when I don't do both, it has always created failure for me. But if I have both, what will happen is that that failure at that time will immediately then get converted into the next learning and it becomes a 2.0. So for me, I think it's always important that I use it together. And that's that is my code. That's how I approach life, and I always need to consciously be wary of not doing that. So,
that's interesting.
Yeah. So for example, one of the companies I worked with was Sony Music. But why did I join Sony Music? Because I'm passionate about music, right? But in Sony Music, it was a great place, all of that, great experience and all that. But I wasn't enjoying myself, okay? Because I suddenly realized that something which I really love, now I have to look at it commercially. Hang on. And that created disconnect for me. So in fact, the listening to music went down in Sony Music. And when I left, again it went back up. So I realized that...
basically it means is you could never start your own coffee company.
In fact, please, I hope my wife is listening because she's like pushing me, start a cafe. I said, no, you don't understand. This is a passion. And for me, I have to be in fact, I have to harness my passions rather than get carried away by them. So a lot of people say that you need to find something that you love. I love everything. When I do something, I do it with love and passion. So for me, it's a question of harnessing, putting it in perspective.
And your perspective is if you start a cafe, you will be forced to look at cafe as a commercial endeavor.
That's one.
Which will kill your
and take
passion.
Sides. And maybe take sides. So for example, me versus another cafe. So I'd rather be a meta identity. Someone maybe at a content level who has to deal with all coffee entities.
So what you are saying is you are like the curator of life.
Yes. Curator,
so
definitely.
People curate paintings and say, hey, these are the 5 most beautiful paintings.
Yeah. So
you could potentially be the curator of life.
Absolutely.
And I can come to you or somebody can come to you and say, curate 5 amazing things for me.
Yes. So, that's my passion.
So
definitely.
What would you, so you know me now, you've spent enough time. What are the 5 things you would curate for me?
So obviously fitness, technology, I think that those cutting edge things.
So what experiences would you want to curate for me is what I mean. So like coffee, you'll say, Vishal, I want you to try this coffee from this cafe. So it's like or like you said, I want you to listen to this particular music track.
Yeah.
So what would you curate 5 things if you have to?
So are you asking for coffee itself?
I'm asking
no?
For 5 examples out of all these crazy examples you have.
So coffee, definitely.
So which coffee, for example?
So I would get you to experience different kinds of flavors. So it would be my endeavor to get you from 1.2 to the next.
Okay.
So that to me is very important. And how I would do it is actually, and it's easier to do it through cafes and not in India. So for example, let's say next time you're traveling.
So Japan, I'm there.
Yes. So when I said I'll tell you which places to go to, And normally when there's a place where I know the people, it's also beautiful. In fact, this is something which I was thinking of, like, hey, can I curate a coffee trail, where people can actually explore? Because I went through this myself. Singapore, first experience, I found via normal search, you get the obvious Starbucks, blah, 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 whatever. But then you connect with people and you find through a barista what he loves and all that. And you find the real network of cafes and coffee shops. So I think A, people don't have that access. And B, that curation like you talked about, that hand holding, which is what I do for myself, I think is something which I know I can blow your mind on. So that I'm very confident on. So if it's currently coffee, if it was running once upon a time, I would have done it.
Well, I've already I've learned chi running from you, right? I mean, I'm your student number 101. Student number 1 for every crazy class you're going to ever start.
Wow.
So when are you starting your coffee appreciation course?
Okay, so that's a good question. Yeah, that's a thought. I've been thinking about how to do this. Yeah.
Because I think that's the next level, like converting your passion into something which is non-conflicting. So creating a cafe could conflict it.
Yeah.
But creating an experience may not.
I agree. I think something that educates, something that takes it to that level is something that definitely excites me. So yes, I would love to,
When it comes to the Superstar Code, you interviewed a lot of people.
Yeah.
So could you talk about 3 people who inspired you? I know you can't ape them and all of that. Even outside the people you interviewed, but who are the 3 people you thought inspired you in some way?
So there were different hacks that people used, and I think that's what kind of got me. Also from people who are very diametrically opposite of me, let's say. So maybe, I would look at with passion and perspective. Somebody would look at it from analysis and rigor, maybe, of whatever, or more importantly, organized. So those kind of things and how they went about it and kind of the impact that it created, those are the kind of things that, I don't know, that influenced me.
So any particular names which kind of come to your mind?
So there was, one, so the famous name, I guess, is, there's Gul Panag. So one of the interviewees, and so, this is my initial impression of Gul Panag, which is, she's adventurous and she does new things and all of that. But when I did that, what came out of it was, everything she does is thought through, meticulous, planned, analyzed. And I was shocked because that's what came out of, the profile and things like that. And then when I explained that to people that, hang on, when she does it, you think that it's all about adventure and this and all that, but it's actually, being...
You think it is spontaneous, but it is not spontaneous.
Not at all. So, just as an example, while the interview was happening, there was a call, and she said, don't worry, Abhijit, please go ahead, because this call, I don't have to take right now. Then after that, there was another call. I said, I'm sorry, Abhijit, but this is a call I have to take. It's my husband, because he's catching this flight, and I will not get a window after this, so I'm going to take. So she was very clear. So there was, so it just, I was like, wow, that compartmentalizing it and being so clear about your priorities. So that really kind of, blew my mind. Who else? So there was Leander Pace. So everything about him was energy and people. Everything was about energy management. So, while you look at the sport and all that, whether it was people, and in fact, even going for the interview, he was hugging the guys at the gate, at the Taj where we did the interview and things like that. So, and when I interviewed him, it was all about human connection, energy.
Very positive.
Yeah. So it was all about spreading that and receiving it.
Yeah. And he does come across very,
so that's
very,
what I got. And I was like, wow, that's like very inspiring. So this is what I remember. By the way, this happened 6 years ago, so I'm like trying to remember.
I know you gave me a whole booklet of my code. I don't even remember that.
I had.
Maybe you have a copy of that too. Yeah,
probably yes. Yeah, but like I said, it happened 6 years ago. So
exactly. So what are the things you own? What are your possessions under 10,000 which you kind of use literally every day?
Besides the books and the music, okay. So I would put the coffee gear.
Okay, the coffee.
So every time I upgrade and stuff like that. So for example, I used to do it in a very unwieldy way, which is like the big thing about coffee is extracting the flavor out of it into the water. And again, what people don't know is that when you grind, there are very fine pieces and then there are very big pieces, boulders. So when you have both, they extract at different rates. So sifting it. So there is something called a Crew Coffee Sifter. which came out of a Kickstarter campaign and stuff like that. So it's a simple device, but it basically gives you the optimal grind and suddenly the flavors just shoot out.
Basically everything is the consistent size. Yeah. In fact, I used to always think that the more uneven it is, the better it is.
No. So I used to actually use a channi because I got this hack from some guys 3 years ago on a video. This is James Hoffman, who's an ex-world barista champion, who's based in the UK. So they actually used to take the grind into a channi. I used to do that. Put it onto tissue paper, napkin. Okay. So the channi would take out the boulders. Then everything is below. Then you take the filter paper and then leave the very fine sticking to the paper. So you would have the middle. And I would use that. And people who saw me brewing like, man, that's like serious
you wasted
OCD.
half the thing.
Yeah, but you calculate that way. And I saw the difference. What essentially, there's a analogy which I'm now quite excited about using in life, which is someone describing the world of specialty coffee, which is that just imagine the different windows. To get that best flavor, you have to ensure that each window is clean. And if it's a dirty window, you're not going to get that net flavor. So again, back to life, it's like, look at your windows and see, hang on, is nutrition the window clean? Is my sleep window clean or dirty? So essentially looking at all the windows and saying, hang on, I need to clean. So I thought it was a great analogy, and that's what the world of specialty coffee is.
So what are your top 3 destinations, travel destinations, and you recommend everybody to go there?
So for me, it's always for a reason and a context and all of that. But Copenhagen was, of course, it came because of the killing. But also because of, I think I fell in love with the Nordic culture. And because of wife, is a chef and there was a food festival going on. That's the other reason, the official reason that we went. But the point was that...
And they have this concept in Scandinavia, right, of this food they eat in the table. I don't know what's it called, but it's now getting very popular, of you eating the food together.
Sure. So, like, for example, in Denmark, they have something called HYGGE, pronounced as hygge.
Yeah, hygge, exactly, yeah.
Which is all about bonhomie. It's about connection. But where does it come from? It comes from them having very harsh winters, no sun. So for them, it's a very important thing to, connect and, like there are places where, seeing a human being is like, wow. Whereas over here, no more people, So it's a context that you need to kind of focus on. But I found that they're very down to earth because like 50 to 60% of all people in Copenhagen cycle to work. Yeah. And I think that creates a different kind of culture. So it's not about who you are and all that. Everybody's doing the same thing, So things like that. So I get fascinated by these kind of journeys. And
so apart from Copenhagen, where else?
Now, because of coffee, I definitely want to go to one place because now I've realized that's truly the capital is Oslo, Norway.
Oslo is the capital of coffee?
Yes.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I used to fixate on Melbourne. And Melbourne is really, really wow on coffee. But now, slowly after experiencing different coffees from that region and the kind of quality and the obsession they have, is like weird, and so now I just kind of, I definitely, it's a bucket list thing. It never was earlier, but now I definitely want to, go and experience.
I need to come and, experience these coffees with you. It's just, we've been just too busy. So we need to figure out to do this.
Honestly, we need to be in a city outside India, and I'm telling you, even Singapore.
No, I'm going to come to your place. I'm sure you have all these beans.
Places that I can do. That I can always do. That I always do for
Oslo, Copenhagen, and where else?
Wife wants to go to Mexico City.
I was just there
really?
2 months back. Yeah.
Yeah, because of food. So there's this new show on Netflix that's come out, Ugly Delicious.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. So there's an episode on Mexico City, and that totally inspired her because seeing that cultural diversity of ingredients and things like that, and it's also a great place for good coffee. It's happening. It's not like developed as much, but
it's not good coffee. I've been there.
No, but there are good. See, every place has its journey. It's like Bombay. So, for example, Paris. You might think Paris cafes, but they are very new in the specialty coffee space. It's only now that some cafes are kind of taking the lead. So it's not like the entire culture is into coffee, as opposed to Norway. So in Norway, for example, the worst of the worst coffee guys will be far ahead of all, what you think.
So my rule is that whenever I travel to a new city, I always try coffee on the local places. I would never go to a Starbucks or any of the chains.
Oh, definitely.
Only go to the local places.
Yeah. But there's a difference I found in local versus the specialty coffee places.
No, the minute you go local, you end up going to the specialty.
No,
ones.
not necessarily.
No?
So, for example, we went to Kuala Lumpur 3 years ago. So, initially, I Googled and found out, and I would get the standard regular, not Starbucks, but different kinds of coffee places, okay? But then I connected, tweeted to some people and all of that, and I got some responses. And then I found, for example, this is 3 years back, there was a service or something called KL Coffee Hunt or whatever, and it had a map of Kuala Lumpur, which had 150 cafes. None of them Starbucks, none of them chain, and specialty cafes. Okay, and why was it a big thing in KL? Because most of these people had come down from Australia, settled back, and they wanted to kind of replicate that experience, and it was hungry for fantastic coffee, that city.
One place which I was surprised about with cafe or coffee was Vietnam.
Yeah, it's changing now.
It has the most amazing coffee culture because the coffee has some kind of a, they add something to the coffee. And what is the most popular coffee there? And I could not drink it.
The condensed milk one.
Condensed milk.
That's the Vietnamese, the iced coffee that...
So, but I was surprised. So Vietnam in one lane had some 40 coffee shops. So the coffee culture there is completely crazy. Yeah. So you should probably at least go there once. It's so close from here, right? I mean, Vietnam would be quite an experience.
Okay, if there are Asian coffee destinations, number one is Japan.
Oh, of course.
But next to that is Korea.
Korea.
Massive. That, for example...
I could never think of Korea. I could always think of alcohol. Koreans consume the most amount of alcohol.
Probably now ahead of Japan.
Korea?
Yes. So, for example, Seoul itself, let's say there are 150, 200 cafes. Every one of them roasts. It's a culture. So, they are very into it. The World Coffee, the Barista Championships just happened in Seoul right now.
Oh.
Yeah. So
you track all of that, huh?
Yeah, I do. So Korea is one. Okay. Hong Kong, massively into coffee. Taiwan, massively into coffee. And they do it in a very, amazing way.
And India, people thought Nescafe shake, chick, and they think that they're there's this guy who drinks Nescafe and thinks that's the most amazing coffee. Dude, this is not even coffee. This is something else. Absolutely. This is not coffee.
That's why they bought Blue Bottle. But anyway. Yeah.
But the world of coffee and the world of specialty, everything, right? Yeah. Whether it is,
By the way, my latest is chocolate.
Oh, God.
Really? So, coming from keto, paleo...
So, I only can eat chocolate about 70%.
I can't eat 100%.
I can't eat 100. It's too
But
bitter.
That's because you're not having the right chocolate.
Oh, God. So, send me some chocolate.
So, for example, I tried the Lindt 99%. It was ash. It tasted like ash to me.
It tastes very bitter.
It's very bad. But I have two brands today. Luckily, they are now supplied in India. So there's a company in Japan, Jaipur, sorry. We were talking about Japan. So they import these two brands. Brand number one is Pacari. Pacari is an Ecuador organic tree to bar, which means everything sustainable, etc.
Wow.
Okay, 100%. When you taste that, and once your palate gets it, it's fruity, it's berry.
And must be super expensive, right?
No,
this one? No,
not really. So, for example, one.
Are you not carrying it with you, man?
No, in fact, that I should have bought. Okay, I didn't think of chocolate. Okay, and the second brand which they've just got is a Madagascar cacao bean. Again, they have variants, 100, 80, whatever. But I take the 100, and I get fruit, berry, and that.
God, I need to. Whenever I try the 100%.
Why this is possible for me? Because of my coffee journey. See, palate got opened up. Now what's happening is, even if I have tea, I get flavors I never used to get before. So food, I get flavors which I would never get before.
Yeah, your brain needs to train.
Absolutely.
To
it's a brain
flavors.
thing. I've realized this. So now with cacao, and it's so healthy, it's not funny. So there's no sugar. It's not about adding some stevia or anything like that. It's pure cacao bean. So I have it every day. So this is my nice...
So what else do you have? What are the other superfoods you have? You have coffee, cacao bean, what else?
That's pretty much it. And 2 meals. So it's only a lunch and
what are your meals consisting of?
So it would be if it's lunch, it would be fish, seafood. So I kind of avoid I stopped eating chicken. So I realized that it is probably the most contaminated meat in this country.
Oh God, I love chicken.
I know, but it is. So, I mean, I used to be a chicken maniac. And my wife is half Goan, so she used to hate chicken, being a seafood person and all of that. But now she's got her way, and now I don't eat chicken. So it's all seafood.
But I thought seafood is also very badly
it's a little better off than chicken. Lamb and chicken, definitely. So that's what I have. And veg and eggs kind of a thing for dinner. So that's like my two things. And my wife keeps innovating and creating something for me by remote control.
So you never decided to turn vegan, shegan and all these things?
I have experimented. So not now, but way back. So there was a time when I got into spiritual journey where, it was encouraged to go vegetarian. And I said, if I can go vegetarian, I can even go vegan. I tried all of that. It didn't work for me. It really didn't work for me. Because I've always, from a family perspective, we've always had,
So Abhijit, where do you see yourself 5, 10, 15 years from now? I mean, you're so young and you're already mastering all these things, right? I mean, where do you see yourself in the next 5, 10 years? What do you see yourself doing?
I think if I'm living, it should be the same
okay.
way.
Is there a doubt on that?
No. What I mean is, it has to be the same way. I have to continuously learn, get something out of it, move on to the next, the 2.0. So to me, that is what matters.
So I'm just saying, did you expect yourself to be a connoisseur of coffee?
Not at all.
100%
and
dark chocolate?
Not at all. But that's what I love is to be proven wrong in some area. So like, how can I have chocolate would have been probably my response, 1 year back.
But one thing which I think you can absolutely not do,
which is
write a book.
I agree with you.
I thought you would have taken that.
Totally agree
I
with
thought you
you.
would have taken that as a challenge to say, okay, I'm going to write a book.
This is the same thing like music for me, which is I love reading so much that putting myself on the other side, I don't know, it just separates me. So yeah, you're right. I mean, it's a mental thing and if I hadn't done it, I wouldn't have known also.
So how can people distill all your knowledge and use it, man? If you're not going to write a book, how can they come and get coached under you? What do they have to do? How does one apply?
No, I mean, people approach me. I mean, they connect with me by number, my email or whatever. But I used to write on the blog. I stopped 3 years ago, but this is that hangover of that tiny habit that I created. I wrote some 300 posts in 300 days.
Posts?
Yes. That was the result of the tiny habit. It became a monster. Every day I would write. I had to write it. I was addicted. It's on Medium. So if you search Abhijit Pradhan on Medium, you would get those posts which used to happen. So for example, I would listen to an episode or something of Brian Johnson, get inspired and put my takes on it, and boom, it would go up. So this is about 3 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's that. I'm active on Insta. I think purely because of coffee.
People can follow you on Instagram because I know I've been seeing your coffee posts and
that's pretty active. I'm not active on Facebook, Twitter, but I'm definitely active on Instagram. Abhijit_DAN Dan. That's me. So you can see the passion for coffee, and even the people who are passionate about coffee get my passion for coffee. So and by the way, that's how I've connected with people. Like there are people in Hong Kong, people in Oslo, people in Copenhagen. I'm loving it because it's a new level of this is something which I was telling someone, which is that when I go, let's say in a new city, when you come from that passion tribe, it immediately breaks down barriers. And suddenly there's this...
And you kind of say you get me, right? Because half the time, I have bulletproof coffee and everybody, why are you having this?
Sure.
99% people think I'm crazy. Actually, maybe you're the only one who doesn't. So it'll be 99.99%.
True.
I do pretty much all the crazy things you do, and I think the same thing.
I suffer from.
And you're like, guys, you don't get it, because once you get it, you will say, why the hell was I not doing this? So
for me, the biggest joy is to connect with people who get it. Yeah. And like you said, there are few, but when I do, and unfortunately a lot of that is therefore out of India and things like that, which is where the social media bit comes in. So for me, social media is about that. It's really about connecting with, that kind of level of passion and, intimacy, which is happening currently, because of coffee. A little bit because of music, jazz and stuff like that, but 90% is coffee.
So, I think... you have said one amazing thing, and I would say if there's one thing I have to distill from my conversation with you, is your quest is to find people who get it. I think that's really what you are trying to do.
Personal quest.
Your personal quest.
Sure.
Because when you are passionate about it, the most important thing you want to do it is share it with someone.
Absolutely.
But if the other person doesn't get it, I mean, what are you going to share? That which bulletproof or which chocolate? People will think, why are you, when there is Cadbury's Dairy Milk, why would you want to eat this 100% cocoa chocolate? You are born cuckoo is what people will say. But I think that's where the superstar code lies. It's about passion and connection. And I think, Abhijit, this has been an absolutely amazing conversation. I have learned so much. I mean, I did not know about all these things, but this is not going to end here. We're going to continue our conversation after this and hopefully get you back on the show with maybe a completely new passion which you probably don't even know about. So all the best with all your endeavors and all kinds of exploits, and looking forward to having you back on the show very soon.
Thanks, Vishal. And by the way, the last summation actually made things connect even better for me. So thanks for that, which is this whole thing of passion is one, but sharing the passion is probably the bigger
with
high.
With people who get it.
I get
with people who get it, not just sharing the passion. So I think after this conversation, I have been able to get it. Amazing stuff.
Anyway, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks a lot, Abhijit.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, everyone.
He bends down to test the warm water for his bath. He comes here to quench his thirst for a hot shower and some podcasts. You can witness how he enjoys having other people talk about cool stuff in his bathroom. Indeed, it helps him with his loneliness. You can find more of his species on ivmpodcast.com, your one-stop destination where you can check out the coolest Indian podcasts. Happy listening.